Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Today we're gonna make fingerless gloves. So for this pattern, you are gonna need double pointed needles. I like a 3.7 needle. It just depends on the size yarn you use. The bigger the yarn, the bigger your needle. You'll also have to adjust how much you cast on. I like this size and these needles, it's my personal preference. I like a smaller stitch. So needles, stitch markers. You'll need these for making your thumb. You also need a stitch counter. You also need a, I don't know what the proper name for this is. I just call it like my reserve stitch holder. Some scissors and a tapestry needle, and you are all set. For this pattern, you will need to know how to knit, purl, and make one left and right. I will go over all of those in the video. So per usual, we are going to do a long tail cast on method. This is that. You're going to cast on 40 stitches total, and that's going to be 13 on one needle, 14 on another needle, and 13 on another needle, and it's going to make this triangle. So you now have 13 stitches on your first needle, and you're going to need to do 14 stitches on your next needle. So you're going to start and pick up the other needle, and this does take some practice. If it gets tangled, you can untangle it, so don't panic, but it does get a little floppy. You're just going to keep going and cast on 14 stitches on your second needle. Now, as you can see here, this is naturally going over here. You just want these to line up. You don't want them to twist so that your cuff is not twisted. I do this by just letting them hang, letting that first needle hang, and it tends to not get twisted. It is difficult because I'm trying to do this on the table, but normally I just have it right in front of my lap and let it hang loose. All right, we've got 13 and 14, and now we're gonna do another 13. All right, you have your cuff started. I'm just gonna put these kind of in the middle. And now to join your work in the round, you're going to take your fourth needle and you want to make sure you have your working yarn and not your tail. You're going to pick your needle up, your first needle, and this is where you're going to start your cuff pattern. And this pattern is knit 2, purl 2. This is what the cuff will start looking like as you go around. So I will demonstrate this for you slowly. This is going to be the knit 2, purl 2 pattern. So you're going to knit 1, knit 2, purl 1, and purl 2. And you just do this all the way around. I typically do my cuff 10 stitches for fingerless gloves. You can do it longer or shorter on your preferences. To build your thumb, once you're finished your cuff, you're going to knit straight across for 20 stitches. And then you're going to place a stitch marker and make a stitch, knit a stitch, make a stitch, place a stitch marker. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. So I am just knitting until I get to that 20th stitch. You want your thumb in the middle of your mitten, so we go 20 in, and here I am placing that stitch marker, and now I'm going to make a stitch by picking up this stitch here. It can be a bit tricky, and it is going to be tight, so you are just going to knit that. Sorry, I go off the screen here for a second. Depending on your tension, this can be pretty tight. You now have an added stitch. You're going to knit one, and then you're going to make another one. So you can see the stitch is really clear here. And you're just gonna pick up that one. And now you have 3 stitches between your stitch markers. To proceed with your thumb, your rows are gonna go 1, 2, 3. And on the first row, you're gonna make a stitch on every side of your stitch markers, just like I did here. And then you're going to knit straight across your second and third row until you have 13 stitches in between those stitch markers. So here you have 3 stitches between the stitch markers that we did just a second ago. I've knit 2 rows, and I just want to show you again how to make those stitches because it can be tricky. I think this is the trickiest part of making mittens. So I'm just going to knit until I get to the stitch marker. I'm going to slide the stitch marker over onto my other needle. Well, actually I'm going to make a mistake first, and then I'm going to slide my stitch marker over. Don't do that. You want the stitch markers on the outside. If you do what I just did, it's fine, but make your stitch here. Knit until you get to the second stitch marker, and then you're going to make another stitch. And then you're going to knit 2 rows and just keep going until you've got 13 in between your stitch markers. So now I've completed the thumb, almost. I've got 13 stitches between my stitch markers. And now we're going to reserve the thumb. We're going to stop messing with the thumb currently and continue to knit the body of our mitten. So we need to reserve those stitches. So I'm going to knit until I get to that stitch marker. So now you're on your second needle, and you can see my 13 stitches. You're going to need your stitch holder or reserve stitch needle, whatever you want to hold your stitches on. I'm just going to knit to the first stitch marker, and then I'm going to slide those stitches off of my working needle, and I'm going to put it on that reserve holder. So we're going to slide the stitch marker and just set that aside. And now you're just going to slide these off onto this holder. This is the smallest holder I have currently. I would honestly get a smaller one just to keep it out of my way when I'm knitting the body of the mitten. The only thing that can get confusing here is you need to cast on another stitch so that you don't have a gap between your thumb and the body of your mitten. So we're going to get rid of that other stitch marker. I'm just going to adjust my needle, and I'm going to long tail cast on one more stitch. And we're going to need that later when we finish knitting our mitten. And now all you have to do is knit the body of your mitten. This is where you can add designs, incorporate different colors. If you want a cable, this is usually where I do my first cable. For this mitten, we're just going to knit straight across. So I'm going to do 20 rows of just straight knit stitch. Here's a little progress pic. I think I'm about 10 stitches into my body here. And you can just see that it's really coming along. You can see where the thumb's going to be, how the body is working up. Now I'm 20 rows into the body of my mitten, and I am actually going to do the same cuff pattern again at the top of the mitten, and this just prevents it from rolling in on itself. I think it gives it a nice stable edge for the fingerless glove. I'm going to do 5 rows of the cuff pattern again, and that's going to be knit 2, purl 2 right on the top here. I'm just going to knit 1, 2, and then move my working yarn to the front and purl. 2. And I'm going to do this for 5 rows. This is what the finished part of that glove is going to look like. Once I finish the 5 rows, I just bind off, and now we're going to work on our thumb. For your thumb, you'll remember that cast on stitch. That's going to leave us 2 extra stitches for 2 of our needles. So that's right there is going to be the first one, and then here's the second one. You're going to pick up this one first, and then that other one we're going to pick up last. So we're going to slide on 5 stitches to each needle. Depending on your tension, your stitches could have gotten tight. They usually will wiggle back out. But if you have a thicker reserve needle, they won't get as tight. So we're just doing 5 stitches on each needle. This is needle 2. And be careful with these, they can drop easily. I have dropped many a thumb. Here's that last one, and just don't forget to pick up that last stitch. This is going to make it so you don't have a gap between your thumb and your body. It just makes it a lot smoother. So we're just going to grab that stitch, and now you're going to knit 10 rows. Just knit straight across. So we're going to slide the needle in as if to knit. And then you're going to wrap your yarn around your needle, like so. And then it just knits around. You're going to knit this for 10 rows. And then we will bind off. So now your mitten's really taking shape. I have one more row to knit, and this is how I keep track. I just start counting from where I pick up that stitch. You've got a little bit of a hole. It's not very noticeable at all once the mittens are finished, or fingerless gloves I should say are finished. I'm just going to knit around one more time because I only have 9 rows, and then all that's left to do is bind off and weave in the ends, and you have half of a set of fingerless gloves finished. So now we've got our 10 rows. Now we're going to bind off. And this is the same bind off I use for pretty much everything. You're just going to knit 2 stitches. And then you're going to pull that first one over your second. And that ends that row. So you're just going to repeat this all the way around your needles. Sorry, I'll try to get this a little bit more in frame. It is surprisingly difficult to knit around a camera. Definitely need a different camera setup. And once I get to the end of this, I'll just set one of the needles down and keep going until I have just 1 stitch left. And here is your completed fingerless glove. Now you just have to weave in the ends.